Okay, welcome everybody. This is our preliminary budget review of September 25th. We'll begin with introductions of those in the room, please. Start in the back row.
Casey Bell.
Kelly Murray. Kathy Chilton.
Peter Callen. Dave Wyndham.
Melody Peterson. Karen Herr.
Kevin Schutte.
Frank Pinter.
Jennifer Byerly.
Terry Drexler.
And Randy Neville.
Commissioners,
Oh,
we're
thank you. Oh, wow.
bringing forward an analysis in regards to the 2019 preliminary budget that was presented to the auditor in August, with a follow-up of where we are currently with cash, what our projection is for cash at the end of the year, what our 10-year forecast is, and where that puts the preliminary budget in relation to that forecast, and then what the preliminary budget presents. So we're going to start off with Jennifer going over the cash flow analysis to see where we are in regards to projected ending fund balance for the year.
So at the end of 2017, we started with 4.1 million, and the revenue that we've received is shown, in the revenue column with the highlighted in yellow is the to be determined revenue. Those are the estimates. Those estimates are based on projections from actuals of 2015, 16, and 17. So that's the same in the expense column. The actual revenue received is not highlighted, and the actual revenue received is not highlighted, and the expenses expended out are not highlighted, and the expenses to be determined are highlighted. And so we come to the projected income or loss. We figure that will be roughly 600,000 to the end of the year. The projected cumulative change was 1.7 million, and we're actually going to come in higher than that.
Could you explain that? Projected cumulative.
So that was based on past the revenue and expenses that were projected. We thought that we would be much lower than we actually are. We thought that our expenses would exceed our revenues, and it's actually not looking as bad as we thought.
Using projections from 15, 16, and 17, the expectation was that we were going to spend much higher. And the reality is that we're spending less than what the projections were.
But what's the 1.7?
That's what the projection. So at the beginning of January, the projection was we were going to lose $1.7 million in cash.
Are you talking
And the
about
reality is that we're not going to do that because we're spending much less than what historically we have spent in the past.
at one time?
So 15, 16, and 17. Over the 15, 16, and 17 period, historically, relative cash, we've been spending much more than what we are this year. We had the budget cuts last year, so that dramatically dropped our projected expenditures. And based on history, we would have spent 1.76 million more than what we received. Based on actual, we're spending much less.
And is there an actual?
So the last column is then the actual. So we're projecting to have $4.8 million in cash at the end of December.
But the actual cumulative change is that 604.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. And
So the
no,
the actual cash, I'm sorry, you were going to go there, never mind. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to talk about the, we're actually 1.2 million over where we were last year at the end of June. And part of that is due to the indirects and things like that being billed quarterly, where in past years they've been billed once a
That's
year.
what I was gonna ask in the beginning, cause that's what I thought was happening. There's been a lot of adjustments to make sure we don't go in that same position we've been in.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's great that we were 1.2 million more at the end of June, but we're not gonna end the year 1.2 million more than we were last year, most likely. It looks like we'll end the year at about 4.4 million if we have the 392,000 in budget supplements that are going to be hopefully approved tonight at the budget hearing. And so those are accounted for in the ending cash balance, which is, roughly 4.4 million.
What did we budget for our unexpended budget authority?
We didn't, if you recall,
Did we put?
we didn't technically budget for
Yeah,
it.
did we actually put 0 in the
Yeah.
line?
So, our budget
You're
currently,
not taking that into account, right, with the
No.
year numbers?
No,
Okay,
no.
good.
what we're budgeting is 4.8 million in cash. If we approve all of the budgeted supplements for tonight, that's about $400,000 less. So the cash for the end of December is looking at about 4,400,000. The reserve at the 12% requirement is 3,920,000 roughly. So we're going to be above our 12% reserve restriction.
Any questions on this at this time?
The next page is the 10-year forecast. So if, I can speak to this projection. The upper left column starts off with an average growth rate from 2009 to 2015 of budgeted revenues of 1.3%, budgeted expenditures of 3.1%. 2009 to 2016, budgeted revenues have come up a little, 2.1%, and expenditures are at 3.9%. 2009 to 17, it's 2.2 to 4.1. 2009 to 18, it's continues going up, 3.4 to 3.4. If you remember, 2018, we budgeted equally expenditures and revenues. So that's why those are the same. The actual numbers are below. So for actual revenue, the growths have increased from 3.2 to 2.9 to 4.1 to 4.7. And expenditures are 4.9, 4.9, 4.5, and 5.1. So what that's telling us is, generally in the past, our expenditures were higher than our revenues, therefore cutting into our ending fund balances. The trend has been to increase revenues and increase expenditures, but the gap between the two has been shrinking over the last couple of years. So that needs to continue going forward in order for us to continue to have the ability to have adequate reserves for financial stability. So then the next column is the projected 2018 budget. We had budgeted revenues of 33,869,000, expenditures of 33,734,000. That's again based on our resolution that said we can't budget for expenditures greater than our revenues. Our actual projected revenues are expected to be around 34,500,000, and actual expenditures are going to be around 34 million. That's going to gain us about $604,000 in increased cash to ending fund balance. Previously, we had just said that that's probably going to be exceeded by a couple of $100,000. But one is a forecast and one is a projection, and the expectation is that we're going to be a couple of $100,000 more than that $600,000 that's represented there. But this is I'm looking at this from a conservative perspective. That's why I'm using a projection instead of a forecast. Then we have the prelim. The preliminary budgeted revenue was 35,464,000, and the budgeted expenditures were 37,393,000. A shortfall of almost $2 million. What this forecast shows, that if we stick to the forecast, which was to say that the projected revenues were, which is now the next column, $35,032,000. The budgeted prelim was $35,464,000. So the forecast was pretty close to what the prelim came in at. 35 million, and the prelim revenue was 35,464,000. It's a couple $100,000 more. Where we are exceeding the forecast is in expenditures. The forecast projects expenditures to be at 34,896,000 for 2019. The actual prelim is at 37,393,000. What that does is the forecast projected us to meet the 15% reserve by 2020 and the contingency reserve by 2021. If we slide the prelim numbers into that, we don't get to the 15% reserve until 2023 and the contingency reserve until 2024. So it pushes it out 2 years because we're spending $2 million we don't have out of ending fund balance.
Eric, what was the resolution date that we had given to ourselves to?
So resolution 5618, oh, I'm sorry, no, that was the wrong one. Where's the other one?
It was 5 years.
It was
so
5 years. But you did give yourself the window to increase expenditures above revenues with a plan that said how we were going to get back to recovering revenues above expenditures.
Thank you.
So the policy did say that by the end of the 5-year period that we would be at least at the 12% reserve, and with a hope to get to the $1 million contingency reserve. No date and time was set for that. Okay. Then we have the next page is the detail of the preliminary revenues and expenditures. Jennifer?
And so we have, for current expense, the 2014, 15, 16, and 17 actuals. And you can see at the bottom of each year.
I would go to page 2.
Yes, page 2, sorry. In 2014, the net cash balance carry forward is 1.6 million. And in 2015, it's a negative 1.274 million, which nets 370,000. In 2016, the net change is a negative 2.5 million, which brings us to a negative 2.1 million cash carry forward. In 2017, we have a positive 678,000 for a net carry forward of cash of 1.486 million. The 2018 adopted budget, we're looking at a possible net cumulative or net carry forward of 200,000 for a cumulative carry forward of negative 1.2 million since 2014.
So what that is saying, since 2014, we've dipped into ending fund balance for $1.3 million through the end of 2018. simply by spending in excess of what our revenues are.
And then that brings us to the 2019 preliminary budget. We had a $41 million request in current expense, including beginning fund balance and ending fund balance. And so if you remove those, the beginning fund balance calculation brings us to $35,464,917 in revenue and $37,393,303 in expenditures, for that shortfall of 1.9 million that Frank talked about earlier. Then we also have the overstated beginning fund balance, since the beginning fund balance of 5.8 million is just used to balance the budget. So we want to account for that. So we're actually at a $3.3 million shortfall in current expense.
To clarify that, the beginning fund balance of $5,852,000 is used to balance the preliminary budget request. The ending fund balance by resolution must be at least 12%. So that is what's been put in as the ending fund balance for $3,923,932. To get the fund to balance, that says that I need to start with $5,852,000. So that's a balancing number. That's not a real number, if we can put it that way. The real number we just looked at is going to be about $4.4 million. So we have to drop the beginning fund balance down to $4.4 million. And if we're going to keep all of the expenditures where they are, that's an additional $1.4 million on the difference between expenditures and revenues of $2 million. So we're at about a $3.4 million net difference between what we have in cash and what the expenditure request in preliminary is. So that takes us to the next two pages. Again, going to the last page, the details, I mean, this has all of the detail for all of the departments and programs, but we're only referring to the bottom line for current expense.
Okay, so for the 2018 adopted budget revenues, we have $33,869,000. For the expenses, we have $35,464,000. The forecast being 35 or 32 for a $432,000 difference. The maintenance level changes are approximately 1.6 million. And of those, they're split out down below. Internal allocations, approximately 613,000. 911 tax, 600,000. Leases on DNR trust, 500,000. Forest excise tax, 300,000. City county assistance, 275,000. Sales and use tax, 125,000. State DNR trust, negative 250,000, timber excise, negative 250,000, and property tax, 177,000, and miscellaneous, negative 140,000, for the total of 1.6 million.
So if I may interject into this, if you recall, maintenance level changes were changes that are contractual. So the revenue changes that were presented are assumed to be contractual, in that they're coming from the treasurer, they're coming from all of the departments, and they're coming together as reductions of grants or additions of grants. Those will be discussed in all of the budget workshops, but the assumption is that those are real revenues that the board is going to acknowledge and accept. They're not policy level requests, as on the expenditure side, to say, we want to change the way we're doing things, and this is how much it's going to cost. So the $1.6 million increase between 2018 adopted budget and the 2019 prelim, the changes are what are identified below. So if you remember, the internal allocation was booked incorrectly last year for $644,000. So that is being picked up in the 2019 budget. That represents a $614,000 net change.
Over 2018.
Over 2018. The treasurer is projecting an increase on the lease on DNR Trust of $500,000, $300 for forest excise, city county assistance of $275. And remember last year at the end of the year we did some budgeting, and if you look down below, footnote number 1, we used $250,000 worth of timber trust to increase revenue, $250 of DNR excise tax, $200,000 of unexpended budget authority, $100 of additional sales tax revenue, $80 of mental health tax, and $500,000 increase in traffic policing to balance last year's budget. So that's just a footnote there to show how we balanced last year's budget. The state DNR and the timber excise stayed zero. So you have some flexibility there on the revenue side, I guess is what I'm trying to say, if you want to go to the same extent that you did last year. Because the assumption in the 2019 prelim is there are 0 state DNR trust funds and 0 timber excise tax funds. So there is some flexibility there. The question is how much of it do we realize? This year we're realizing some portion of the 250 that you added in. We'll have an answer of exactly where we think that's going to end up at the end of the year. I believe we're going to end up on the positive side. In other words, that it's going to be more than the 250 we budgeted for. This year we don't have any budget in there for it. And the question's going to be, do you want to estimate what we think might be there for next year? So there are some revenue options there. Then we have expenditures.
Yes, so on the expenditure side,
Before you go on, 911 tax?
That's a pass-through. If you notice
That's
on,
what I thought.
yeah, we hadn't
Okay.
gone to the other side yet,
Okay.
but that's a pass-through. We collect the tax and then we submit that right out. So the tax receipts have gone up as well as have our expenditures. There are not a few of those things that occur on the current expense side where we have money that comes in that goes straight back out again, and all it does is inflate our budget. So as the taxes increase, the money coming in increases as well as the money going out. I'm sorry, go ahead.
oh, that's okay. So on the expense side, the 2018 adopted budget is $33,669,000. And for the 2019 preliminary expenditures, $37,393,000. So the difference being the maintenance level changes of 1.124, which consist of the things down below, ER&R vehicles, salary and wages, benefits, some of the salaries and wages, salaries and benefits from the supplement from June 26th this year. Those are included in the maintenance level changes.
On the forecast that you have now, that does not include the supplementals we're about to be discussing tonight?
No.
And can you round me up a number real quick for that?
400.
Thank you.
But those are not, none of those are ongoing, right?
No.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But
They're-
Not
they're-
like this 260.
Right, it's not like the 269
No.
and the 67.
But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff from last year that wasn't ongoing. It's just
Yeah, yeah.
it's so you're saying 400, so
For the policy level requests, those amount to approximately 2.6 million, and those consist of the items listed down below, the 600,000 911 tax that Frank mentioned was a wash from, the revenue. It comes in as a revenue, out as an expense. 500,000 in approximately 10.5 FTEs, 400,000 in patrol vehicles, 300,000 in off-site custody, 250,000 in benefits, 115,000 risk insurance increase, 110,000 in increased overtime, 96,000 in MACECOM, 50,000 chemical dependency, 45,000 tactical equipment, and a negative 54,000 in Pro Phoenix, and then miscellaneous 138,000.
So the MACECOM did raise it up that much?
No, I'm curious to see the.
That has not been entered into here.
Okay.
Well, let me back into that. So the MACECOM is 96,000, but the Pro Phoenix, which is part of MACECOM, the negative 54, those two combined do represent the $50,000 increase that is expected in MACECOM. So the MACECOM.
In user fees?
In user fees, correct. So unless there's a different number that's coming forward.
Yeah, I think there might be a different number.
Okay, this is a week or two ago
Yeah.
data.
I just want to point out really quickly, if the board were to approve a 1% salary increase across the board, it would be approximately 175,000 cost, which is not included in the budget. And additionally, in benefits, if the board were to approve a $52 a month benefit increase across the board, it would cost approximately 150,000.
That would be for the medical.
Yeah, is that because it went up by that much from what we're paying currently?
That's been the increase that we have been giving, which is trying to keep up with what the increased costs have been. And it's actually doing a pretty good job of keeping us constant. So as it's moving up, we're keeping up pace with what that
And
increase
you're
is.
saying that's a cost of 175?
150. No, the
One-
1% salary,
Is 175.
Yes.
The other is 150?
correct. So basically what this is saying is of the change in expenditures for 2019, 1.1 million is maintenance level, meaning it's because of CBAs, it's because of previous board action for supplementals, staffing increases, longevity changes, things of that nature, changes in DRS, changes in LNI. The 2.6 million is for predominantly categorizing in the groups below. Staffing level increases, vehicles, outsourcing, county insurance premium increases.
Is that policy level though?
We stuck it there because it wasn't contractual. We could argue one way or another. I don't think insurance should be a policy level, that's maintenance level. We can't say no.
Does anybody remember what the chemical dependency charge was, 49,130?
I'm sorry?
What the programming was around the chemical dependency, 49,130?
I can do some research into exactly what that, this was just
But
a
I
sub,
would find it in here, right?
it's,
Probably not.
probably not, it's mixed pieces of what's up above.
Okay, so why are we doing the 901 tax under this line? Why are we doing the insurance under this line? Why are we putting 400 for patrol vehicles under this line right now?
Well, I could argue that the 600 should be in maintenance level, because that's just a pass-through. I
Okay,
can
but
also
being a
argue,
pass-through, is that an increase? Because
we have the increased revenue,
Okay,
and that's just a pass-through. So, and I might argue that that should be under maintenance level changes,
I would think it would, and then, if it's pass-through.
because you have no discretion in that. If you're gonna collect the tax, you've gotta distribute it. So I might argue that that should be on the other side, as well as the risk premium should be on the other side, because again, you can't say no to the insurance increase.
Because if you were to try to look at the maintenance level revenues, and then it'd
Yeah,
be kind of
that's what it
unbalanced
means,
to not
yeah.
have the 600 there.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah, we can,
Yeah,
perfect
we'll-
that
we'll-
all next year. But, for this year.
Going
it-
forward, because
yeah.
we're gonna keep iterations of this document in front of the board for you to look at where you were and during the budget the budget, workshops. As you're changing the budget, you can see what it's coming in at.
I'm trying to figure out what part has to be done, what part doesn't. And when I have this list, and I'm looking at these are things that are not have to be, so these are,
That's why they're policy level requests.
okay, but, that's already in there.
It's in the prelim.
Yeah, it's in the prelim, but if we focus on status quo.
That's the maintenance level.
As we talk, plus the maintenance, there's still gonna be some costs that are gonna go above the maintenance, obviously, because of, they're saying some of these things have to be paid. So we have to figure out which ones those are to have them included. And then eventually, I'm trying to figure out, we got to figure out, what's your best guess for the revenue based on our historical, what you did this last year, being conservative as you did. There may be some that come up much higher. Being conservative as you are, where are we going to be? And will it meet the bare minimum of the maintenance level with plus the things that are not included right now in maintenance that have to be covered?
So based on this, I'm seeing 87,717 difference on this conservative maintenance level revenues. And if you move the risk, the insurance premium and the 91 tax over, then the difference between maintenance level expenditures, maintenance level revenues is 87,717.
I don't, so if I take maintenance level, increase it by 600 and 115,000,
Right,
that gets me to 1,825,000 roughly.
right.
1,600,000 is where the maintenance level revenue is,
I thought it was 1.736.
minus 140. So it's the,
Okay,
it's
okay,
100,
okay, I didn't
1,000,006.
notice the 140, sorry.
So it's 1,000,006, so the difference is 225,000.
Okay, thanks.
And to get back to your answer, what I mentioned was, we don't have the sale of the state DNR tax and the timber tax of 250 each, which is an additional 500,000. To answer your question, what do I think conservatively? I would think that because we're collecting some piece of that this year, and last year we added it back into the revenue side to increase the revenues, I think conservatively we can add at least 200 or 250 back into the revenue side, and that gives us the 250,000 that we're looking for to cover the maintenance level requests.
How are those tracking this year so far, do you know?
They're above.
Okay.
And that's what I said, I would come back.
Each one is above?
Each one is above what you were
And then we
projecting.
have, do we have their estimates for next year? For, not the DNR?
No, we don't have
obviously,
those
excise
yet.
tax wouldn't be.
Right, we don't,
Then
the
we'll-
DNR one we do, but the timber excise we don't yet. But timber excise kinda tracks along with the DNR, and DNR projection is about 1,300,000 for 2019.
Okay,
So if we're gonna budget $220 or $200,000, that could dramatically be much higher.
So what you're telling me right now, though, is you believe we have the ability to bring in and budget for the revenue that will be a complete wash with the maintenance level and keep us where we need to be for our ending fund balance.
Correct.
Okay, but that does not include a couple of these that you say are definitely increases that are not cash coming in, such as increases to MACOM, and
Correct.
so we need to figure out which ones of these and how many hundreds of thousands.
MACOM one, as I read the email recently in the last day or two, I think it was, it looks like it's coming in less than what it was last year.
Mhm.
So that may be completely off
And
the
that's
table.
why I was surprised to see the number that you have there.
This is the number that was budgeted in prelim.
Because I mean, I think the difference between last year's and this year's user fee was less than $1,000. So.
Well, plus Pro Phoenix is being
but
eliminated.
Swapped out, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so there may not be a change there. These are against prelim numbers, not current, current cost projections, if I can put it that way. So basically, what I guess what we're saying is that 95 may go away.
Okay,
So that's a worst case scenario.
yeah. So are there other ones that you see in here that you think are absolute necessities that we do not have underneath maintenance?
There would be, and it kind of falls in the miscellaneous area.
Just give me a
And,
rough
yeah,
number.
I don't know, it depends.
200,000?
And if, maybe, yeah, I mean, if you wanna project, those miscellaneous are 50 grand this way, 170 grand that way, 200 grand this way.
But we have to be prepared for
Well,
it.
it's, yeah, it's, what is above are the highest numbers, you know, the top 10, if I can put them that way. Everything else that is in the miscellaneous are lots of numbers going in many different directions, but all predominantly less than $50,000.
Okay.
And how relevant they are and what's the importance will be brought forward in the workshops.
Any more questions on this at this time?
I hear you reading.
And then the mental health transfer to OPD is still, is due 2019, right? I'm seeing it here.
That is included in the policy level requests. Or no, I'm sorry, I was looking.
Where do you see that?
Preliminary revenues, OPD, 80,000, 2019 preliminary revenues.
It's, oh, okay, yes, I see. It's in the prelim, yes.
And I think one of the biggest questions, in my opinion, is that 1%. And perhaps the benefit increase, although with that 1%, I think maybe.
So this kind of gives you a baseline prior to the budget workshop starting up. We'll kind of make some adjustments based on your recommendations here. And then true up some of the things that have changed since the prelim, i.e. MACOM. And then continue keeping track of where these are based on what your workshops are presenting to you and what your decisioning is, based on the policy level request.
So Frank, as I take a look at this, we certainly have the policy level request expenditures. Are there any policy level requests on that would affect
From a
revenue?
policy standpoint, I felt that, I'm gonna represent them all in the maintenance level requests, and then allow the departments to come forward to argue if their policy, and if I'm bringing in an extra $50,000, I'm using it to cover these $50,000 worth of costs.
Just make sure that they're not already in our assessment of what we think our revenue is, so that we don't have a confusion there. We have to, if our
Yeah, if you're
assessment
going
says we
to-
got $100
There
Yeah.
has
to
to be
pay.
some way to break that out.
Yeah.
so-
Correct, and we'll back into that as we come through in the policy conversations that say, I wanna increase my expenditures by 50,000, and by the way, here's the money for that. We'll move that over to the policy side in the conversation for revenue, And then we can keep track of how much money, revenue-wise, we have, maintenance versus policy.
But set us on our bottom line, without those. You know, set it up
Yeah,
separately.
which is what I've
So
done
that-
here.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that there is.
so
no
that as you
confusion
move it,
when we're
then
talking,
we'll
we
be
can-
able to track it.
Yeah, and again, please, well, they're already here, I'll express that I'm always interested, if you wanna look at reorg for your organization, I'm interested in looking at it. It's helped us at different times, we've done it in our departments, if you decide that's something you'd like to look at doing that, I think the commission should be very open to looking at that, especially for saving money.
And then for expediency, the last page is simply the same thing, except including all of the special funds. And again, those will be brought forward as a policy level conversation with each of the special funds.
Are there any other known supplemental issues coming up other than today's, because we've still got 3 months left?
No. Known at our end.
Yeah.
So that means maybe.
Yeah, that means there may be, yes. But known at our end, no.
And right now, I wanna double check, and I know you said this already, I just wanna double check. In your projections that you're using now, you're putting 0 still in the unexpended,
Correct.
okay.
Not considering unexpended budget authority at all. Nor are we considering DNR revenue, nor are we considering, what was the other, timber excise. Any other questions?
Commissioner?
No.
Commissioner?
So at the sake of maybe having you repeat something that you've said probably a number of times already, what is the gap between the projected revenue and the maintenance level expenditures?
Nothing if we
3.3
increase it.
million.
Huh?
No, maintenance level.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Nothing if we increase it by the 200,000 you're talking about.
correct.
If we increase that.
What is it with, so it's 300,000 less than, okay, gotcha.
Yes. Sorry, didn't
Versus,
understand what you're saying.
versus, including all the policy level.
Correct.
Commissioners, would you be, okay with, you know, like this is our workshop, but there may be some that have questions right now, this might be a good time, would you be?
Sure.
You're okay? Is there, anybody that would like to ask a question, of our staff in regards to any of this right now? Hearing none, thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thanks, Jenny.